It's time again for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.
Hi, I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
And I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And we're the Insiders. And we're just a year out from an election here in Wisconsin. And we're not sure exactly who's in charge in Wisconsin's elections anymore. So how do you think this whole Meagan Wolfe mess is going to sort itself out over the course of the next year?
This is pretty wild. You're right, Scott. I mean, we really ought to have certainty a year out from the election, especially in this environment where nationally people are always being challenged on this. What's really wild to me is that the legislative Republicans admitted that the vote that the Senate took was merely symbolic with regard to whether or not Meagan Wolfe should have her job. Oh, yes, we acknowledge that legally, yes, she's entitled to the job. Wow, that's not the kind of shenanigans you want to have in an area that so many people in our state feel that there may be some question about the election. Why? Because legislative leaders are telling them there should be a question about whether the person is there. The other thing is, all of the controversy around Meagan Wolfe relates to how she executed things that were actually ordered by the elections board. All she did was do her job. No one yet has pointed out where Meagan Wolfe made any mistakes. I mean, God bless us, or God, thank you, God, for giving us Meagan Wolfe. She's a hardworking professional who just does what she's told by the elections board. And she's a good professional. Clerks around the state have said this. She does a great job. So why is there a controversy? It all goes back to election denial. This has nothing to do with the administration of elections, other than it could harm that. Meagan Wolfe has done a good job. We have some of the safest, most absolutely secure elections of anywhere in the country. And in our country, we do a marvelous job to begin with. This is outrageous that we're still talking about Meagan Wolfe as a problem. She is not a problem. She is part of the solution. Scott, where does this come from on the other side? Why are Republicans so crazy about this?
Well, sometimes in politics you lead in your constituency, and sometimes you follow your constituency. And I think what's clearly happening here is that Republicans are following their constituency. There are a significant number of Republicans who believe the last round of elections were not fair, that Meagan Wolfe was not an even-handed administrator in those elections. And therefore, they have been trying to find a solution, trying to find relief from that. And so they push the base keeps pushing on the legislators. The legislators then respond saying, well, we're going to fire her. And then they say, well, the AG and others say that we can't really fire her. So maybe it's just kind of symbolic, but we tried to fire her. And then it's like, well, maybe we should impeach her, or maybe we should do, replace her. All those things are going on because they are responding to their constituents. And I know it's fairly easy for people to say to politicians, well, you should ignore your constituents and just do the right thing, except when the right thing is not what they want to be done. Then they flip it around and they say, well, you should listen to me on this one. So as a politician, you and I used to get this all the time, right? There are people who would say, we elected you to go to the Capitol and vote the way we want. And then other times they'll say, you shouldn't vote what everybody else wants. You should do what you think is right. And those two things are in conflict at times, and politicians have to make a decision. Am I going to, on this one, lead? Or is this one, am I going to follow? And I think it's clear that with regards to the Meagan Wolfe situation, Republicans have been following their base.
I think Scott makes a good point. Definitely, I think this relates to them following their base. But the problem here is that it is objectively not true that she had any problems with her administration. She did an outstanding job, and we've been very fortunate to have her. Here's the difference between where Scott and I were 20 some years ago and where things are today. Scott and I had policy decisions, and you could make an argument on either side on the policy decision. And good arguments can often be made on both sides. That's what made for a good legislative battles, and they were good battles. But today, the problem is that objective truth no longer has any currency. And I agree with Scott that it is the MAGA base that is really driving Republicans in what they do. But when you are so malleable that you don't just disagree with a policy provision, but you are willing to avoid objective truth, that's what really gets you into trouble. Because once you get to that, then the election maybe can be denied and even overturned, even though objectively it was won. The fundamental thing that I think has come through in all the discussions of all the court cases that are going on nationally and here in Wisconsin is that at the end of the day, each side has to be ready that when they lose the election, they admit that and accept that. And by the way, for the last 4 to 6 years, what's been happening is that Democrats are willing to do that and do it consistently, and Republicans do not. And yet those people who continue to deny legitimate elections, like Kerry Lake in Arizona, continue to be people that Republicans are willing to nominate and send into the election against Democrats. That is a danger zone for our democracy. All of us should be seeing red flags all over the place if we're objective about this.
Neither party is always objective. Neither party behaves in that way in a consistent fashion. Politics is an emotional business. It is not a logical business. Whenever someone comes up to me and says, could you just try to explain to me, how did they get to that answer? My response is to say, it's not a logical business, it's an emotional one. And that's absolutely true. If we're looking for truth, that's truth. Politics is an emotional business. And clearly, this is an emotional issue for many Republicans around the state.
I think there's a lot of truth in what Scott says there. But at the end of the day, if we cannot accept election results in a democracy, we are headed down a very dangerous road to authoritarianism. I hope we don't go there.
See you next week.
You've been listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and the Tommy G. Thompson Center on Public Leadership.